Welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Penny Wolfgang. As we discussed during the election season, the one topic about the presidential race that almost all of us agreed on is that we did not think a winner would be determined on election night, and we were right. So we are recording this program Wednesday morning, and as of now, the race for president remains tight, with votes being counted and battleground states still in the spotlight. So here to break this all down with me in the studio is Dr. Peter Iacobucci, an associate professor of political science and public law coordinator of the American Democracy Project and coordinator of the Conflict Analysis and Resolution Program at SUNY Buffalo State. Also joining us through Zoom technology are political strategist Jack O'Donnell from O'Donnell and Associates and Vic Martucci from Mazziello, Martucci, Calabrese and Associates. So welcome everybody. Dr. Iacobucci, who is here with me. We're going to start with you. So is this how you thought things were going to go?
No, not exactly. I looked at the polls, as I think all of us did, and I expected Biden to win. And I thought, well, we may not know by Tuesday night, we would know by mid-morning where we are today on Wednesday. Instead, what we're looking at 7 states right now that have yet to be called, that are going to be, all of them are going to be very, very close.
So, Jack and Vic, what do you think about that? We'll ask Jack. So, did you expect it to go this way?
I would say I'm not surprised that it went this way. I do think, as you mentioned, maybe the biggest loser last night were the pollsters, who got it even more wrong than they did in 2016. But I'm not surprised with an extraordinary year and a lot of paper ballots that we're still counting.
Vic, he mentioned the magic word, Vic, pollsters, that you have talked about on this show so many times. But right. Did you think it was going to go this way, the way it is now?
Actually, as of Monday and Tuesday morning, I did, because as you know, Judge, I follow the Real Clear Politics averages. And to my astonishment, after the last time you and I were together on the air, over the last 5 days of the election, the movement towards Trump was remarkable in these battleground states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. It clearly, I went from believing Biden was going to win to it's a 50-50 toss-up. And so I'm frankly, based on the polling that I looked at, and as you and I know, we looked at trends, not at the raw numbers, it was trending in the president's direction. Question now is whether it was too little too late.
And like I learned from you a long time ago, polling is just a snapshot in time. I learned that when...
That's correct.
Okay, so Jack, we've heard that early voting is primarily done by Democrats, and we saw record numbers across the country. Are you surprised that the count for Joe Biden was not higher because of this?
Well, I think we still are counting those votes, right? And I think that's why Democrats across the country are still fairly optimistic that Vice President Biden is going to win this race, because we do think most of those ballots that are out, especially in those Midwestern states, look to be Democratic votes.
Yeah. Hey, Vic, the New York Times is reporting that Trump, quote, falsely declared himself the winner around 2:30 a.m. Eastern. He said he would call on the Supreme Court to stop counting ballots in states where he led, while urging that there was more counting in states where he was behind. And he claimed fraud, and he called the election an embarrassment to the country. These are all quotes from the Times. Was that the right thing to do for him?
Well, believe it or not, I was up at 2:30 and watched that speech, much to my dismay. And, you know, as a lifelong Republican, every time he makes statements like that, it's a great frustration to me. It was not the right thing to do. Patience is the watchword right now. It's entirely possible he still has a path to victory. It's narrow, but he still has a path to victory. And it casts a shadow on the legitimacy of our election process. And that does not benefit the country, in my opinion.
Jack, Joe Biden addressed supporters kind of just like what Vic said and said, we need patience, let's have patience. We believe we're on track to win the election. We're going to have to be patient. It ain't over till it's over. It ain't over till the fat lady sings, but he didn't say that. It ain't over until every vote is counted. Are we seeing that response is typical for each of the two candidates?
Absolutely. Biden has been much more measured in his pronouncements throughout this process, and I think has a much bigger respect for the process. And let's be clear about what that process is. The president said, "Oh, we want to stop having people cast ballots." Well, that's happened. No one else is casting ballots. These are all, they're signed, sealed, and delivered, and we just need to count them. We want to watch it happen.
Yeah, probably. Now, Dr. Iacobucci, the last time there was a contested election was in 2000, and 20 years later, we're back to a time where we need patience. So what is the legal course that's going to be taken now?
Well, one thing I'd like to point out, the battle in 2000 was over Florida, and it was over a flawed ballot design. So you had individuals that were voting, and then it was unclear who they actually were voting for when the
hanging
people
chads
were hanging chads and the butterfly ballot. This doesn't appear to be the problem in any case that I know of here. The battle here is whether or not an individual got their ballot in on time. And that's a question of, was it postmarked? Wasn't it postmarked? How did it come in? And that's a different legal question. And the big difference here is you're talking multiple states here, not one single state. And that will make a significant difference because every state has a different legal code that they use for their elections.
Yeah, people keep forgetting that states control their elections. It's hard to get the public, I think, to understand that. Jack and Vic, what do you think of the vote counts still taking place, the timetable? What's the timetable? What do you see happening? Jack?
Well, I think already this morning we're seeing some more votes Wednesday morning come in from Michigan and Wisconsin. I would expect by later today or certainly by tomorrow morning, if these follow course, that Vice President Biden will be ahead in those states. And then I think we can, settle in and hopefully resolve some of this.
Vic, you think so?
Yeah. Pennsylvania, we know, will not be settled until the end of the week. They have the law in Pennsylvania says that they have to count ballots that are received up to 3 days after Election Day, as long as they were mailed by Election Day. And the legal battle there is going to be whether the Secretary of State had the authority to grant that extension, because the law in Pennsylvania was ballots had to be received by Election Day. And that was established by an elected legislature. I agree with Jack. I think we're going to know Michigan and Wisconsin at some point today. I also think we're going to probably know Georgia and North Carolina. Most likely Nevada. There's discrepancy out there about Arizona. Some networks called it for Biden, some didn't. I think Biden won Arizona. I think that's going to prove out, and I expect him to win Nevada. So the question is going to be the recount mechanism. I don't think Biden is going to win by big enough margins in Michigan and Wisconsin to avoid a recount. He has to win by more than 1 percentage point in each of those states. Otherwise, the president has the ability to petition for a recount. And then Pennsylvania, I expect litigation even after all the votes are counted by the end of the week.
You're nodding. Dr. Iacobucci is nodding.
The one correction I might make is Nevada announced this morning that they will not be releasing any more results until tomorrow. And also in Nevada, they are accepting ballots up to 7 days after November 3rd. So we're talking November 10th. Ballots could be coming in. At the numbers I saw this morning had Biden ahead by 8,000 votes. That's such a small number of votes. And so those ballots that are coming in later this week, even this weekend or early next week, could be the ones that make a difference in Nevada.
Now, COVID. It was clearly an issue. Did it play positively with COVID fatigue being, Trump's statement to a lot of people, and then his handling of the pandemic being the issue for others? And what effect do you think it had?
I think it's going to take a little while for us to know that for sure as we look at exit polling. But the initial look at exit polling is Trump voters, especially Trump voters that showed up on election day. The economy was very important to them, and Trump's message of we need to get the country back going, even though we have the pandemic going on, seemed to work very well with many of his supporters. And you saw his base, and especially swing states, expanded, grown. He earned over 200,000 more votes in Miami-Dade than we saw 4 years ago. That's a significant growth of his base in a stronghold that's normally relatively Democratic. So that message of getting the economy going seemed to work very well for President Trump.
And also they kept saying that when the exit polls or whatever, coming down to what issues people were the most concerned about, the pollsters and all of us, and beforehand, Jack and Vic, we all were talking COVID. I remember, Vic, you telling me COVID when you were here recently, but it didn't turn out that way, really.
Well, I think you see two different models. I mean, you see Biden suggesting, look, we can only get the economy going once we have the pandemic under control. We need to, all wear our masks and sanitize our hands. Where you see President Trump completely throwing that out. I mean, his rallies in the last week were simply super spreader events of COVID. I mean, you couldn't design them any better. And while that was the case, and many people, many health professionals just sort of shook their head of what was happening with the president, it worked at the polls. I think that approach certainly attracted a significant number of voters.
Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious. So, well, when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation about election 2020 and talk about local races and other topics when we continue with the big picture. Please stay with us.